Hey guys, this is Nate with BleepinJeep. Today we're finally going to put a winch bumper on this J10 pickup truck. We're probably looking at 80 or 90 bucks worth of steel. My local steel yard has a section where if it's a chunk that's, a 20-foot section and they cut 16 feet off for a customer, then they have these little remnants and they'll just charge you by the pound. So it's a lot cheaper to buy by the pound these days, and that's how I decided to do it on this build. As you can see, I've got a 1/4 inch plate that I think I'm going to try to utilize as some sort of a winch channel. I don't have a press brake, so I can't press brake the front of it up, but I can cut, and I've got some tricks and stuff around that so we can mount our fair lead really close to the front here. I've been trying to think of how to do this front bumper for a long time now. Last week I reached out on social media. A bunch of you guys gave me a bunch of really good advice, some different bumpers I should check into. One guy was recommending this company out of Australia, makes some pretty badass bumpers. But anyway, so I'm going to integrate pretty much all those ideas. I like a lot of different styles of bumpers. I like dimple dies. I think dimple dies make things look sweet and super off-road. I like the plate steel on the bottom side of the bumper. I really like the stingers when the stinger looks good. I don't think a typical stinger is going to look good here. I think that if I did a stinger, I'm going to have to do 2 bends in order to kind of follow the contour of this grill. So we'll see what we come up with. For now, I'm just going to build a winch plate. We're going to mount it onto the frame rails, and then we're just going to start sticking steel together and see what looks good. Our goal is to keep it as streamlined as possible. I'm going to cut the front of this. I'm going to I'll probably trim the front of the grill a little bit to recess the winch in and try to keep this as close to the front of the Jeep as possible. Probably taper it off to the sides here. I haven't figured out what to do with this. This is supposed to come with a little piece that kind of fits in here. I could just take these ones off of this extra truck I have out here, but this truck is so complete, I feel kind of guilty robbing anything off of it, so I probably won't do that. The other option, of course, would be to build a bumper that maybe comes up. I mean, I could build it really high and cover this. I'm not sure yet. Do something where maybe it could cut it flat here. I've got so many different ideas of how to fix this problem, because the bumper's going to look, the whole front of the Jeep's going to look weird, I think, with this opening. We'll see. Maybe I can trim this in a way that'll make it streamlined and it won't make it look as gaudy. I'd like to utilize these factory holes that are in the frame, and I think I'm going to make these 2 pieces extend out past our winch plate, because I'm somehow going to integrate this 1/4 inch material through the front of the bumper and then maybe weld, 1/2 inch on each side maybe to make some D-link mounts. I like the idea of the D-link mounts being welded to something that connects all the way to the frame. The 2 plates we just cut out are going to end up going on the sides of the frame rails here. If you look close, you'll notice that these are coming out at an angle. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a lot of the meat out of this and in this line, and then I'll bend the steel to where it's squared up and straight on both sides. Make it a little bit easier to make the plate match up with that surface and make it just look good. Then I'm going to trim a little bit out of the front of this grill so we don't have that super goofy bumper hanging out like I was talking about before. Every inch is going to make a difference in the way that this looks when I'm all finished up.
Fuck, bruh.
Doesn't look too bad, but I think it still sticks out a little bit too far. So I'm going to trim a little more out of the grill to move the winch back. Looks like if I trim all the way up to here, then I can get about 1 3/8 to 1.5 inches, somewhere in that ballpark. Bringing all of this a little closer to the Jeep, I think, is going to look a lot better. As you can see, I've been sketching. I'm going to trim this whole thing back to this line, and then I'm going to cut out that guy and that guy. The front of this is going to get a big piece of steel that we're going to mount the fair lead to. So I just got to cut a hole in the middle, and then I'm going to be bending this plate steel around where these points are. Cut a chunk of steel for here, and then from here I'll probably go a little bit sharper of an angle. Just kind of slowly step it down to taper to the edge of the grill. There we go. I think that's looking pretty good. I like that overall shape and contour. So now we need to build the plates. One's going to mount the fair lead here. Then we're going to go around the side, build one here, build one there. Did a little layout here. I've got the holes marked for the winch to bolt into this winch plate. And then I've got some holes that I'm going to drill. This is going to be for the fair lead. These holes that I'm drilling actually aren't to mount the fair lead. They're just going to be a clean way to terminate the edges of this square. Once I get these holes drilled, I'm going to take my angle grinder with a cutoff wheel and just cut everything as clean as possible. I don't like to use plasma cutters and stuff like this because it makes it a lot harder to clean up. And my plasma cutter doesn't cut super clean. As you can see, there's a lot of extra stuff in there, and it's really hard to get an angle grinder in there and clean that up correctly. So I'm just going to cut it with a cutoff wheel as cleanly as possible. I bolted the fair lead on, and then I went ahead and threw a couple of tacks on the back side. So I'm going to bolt the winch on, test fit it on the truck. I think this plate's going to work just fine. I like the way it looks. Looks like a pretty good base point to start to build the rest of the bumper off of. I'm going to take this 1/2-inch plate, I'm going to weld it up to the inside here, and then I'm going to drill a hole through both plates to be the receiver for our shackle. I'm going to cut it at this line here, do the same thing on the other side. And before I do all that though, since I have this bent where I want it, I'm going to throw a couple of I'm going to throw like one really heavy bead right here to keep this from shifting as I'm unbolting and drilling and welding and all that other stuff. I'm welding together these shackle receivers. I've already got one done. Just kind of welded it all up. Now it's ready for me to drill the hole that we can mount the shackle to. I'm going to weld this other one up, start drilling some holes. Bolted the shackle receivers in. Next step is going to be weld this plate, and then I'm going to put some support in the middle. So what I did is I built a plate that bolted onto this cross member. Then I'm going to take some of this, this isn't 2x4, but something close to it. I think it's like 1.5 by 3.5. I'm going to weld it to the bottom right there to reinforce the back of this plate. I've seen people bend these whenever they're winching something really heavy or if they're really stuck. And this is going to help combat that. If I weld this up, then it's going to give it a really solid anchor point in the middle across the center of this cross member. Now that we have a bunch of this tacked in, I'd like to get started on kind of a little, like a lower valance kind of thing. I think it would look good to build the bumper down a little bit. I'm also going to put something on the sides here as I build this bumper out. But before I take this off and do any more welding, I want to make sure that as I'm welding, nothing warps on me, which is why I want to tack together the lower valance, because it'll, as I'm welding anything up and over here, it's going to try to pull one way or the other, and that valance will hopefully keep things squared up enough to where they don't distort on me as I'm going along. I think I'm going to put these at an angle. I think it's going to look the best. And I'm going to be using what's called dimple dies. It's where you drill a hole and you put this little device in your press and it'll kind of bow out the inside of the hole. It builds strength. You lose a little bit of weight, which that's not really what I'm going for here. I'm going for aesthetics. I think they look cool. It looks really off-road. So I'm going to put 2 holes here in the middle, and I'm going to put 1 hole on each side and see how it looks. This is a dimple die. Put your material on the top of the die, place the other side of the die in there, then you press it, and it's going to have this like concave looking hole at the end of it. So I like to use a press. You can also run a bolt through. Well, I went ahead and tacked this lower valance in. I think it looks good. The dimple dies add a little extra dimension. So now what we're going to get started on is these upper plates right here, and we're going to start building this bumper out. I'm speeding through a lot of this because I have a lot of bumper left to build and not a lot of time to do it in. So we need to get started. So I tacked these little side plates in, put some 1.5-inch strips on the side here, and this is going to be where the end of the top plate kind of terminates. So I'm going to build a lower section that's going to go under here and kind of taper, and then I'm going to build an upper section that's going to be flat, and that's going to taper right here. And I'm probably going to use this to mount the upper hoop. I'm going to make a stinger. It's going to come out off the top, and then I think I'm going to support it with some tube coming out of here to the back of the stinger. We'll just have to see how that all plays out. But the next thing on the agenda, I've got to figure out how to build this out and build the bottom and give it some structure. And so I'm going to mess around with that. I cut 2 of these strips at 20 inches long, and then I just measured to 4 because I knew I was going to make a bend somewhere. So I just measured to 4, cut it a little bit, bent both sides to match. Let's see here. So that's going to mate up with that. And I think I'm going to make another cut on the edge there and bend that around a little bit farther. So since I know this bend is going to work, I'm going to tack both sides so it doesn't move on me, and then I'll measure out the same distance on each side and make another cut and another bend. I figured out my bends. I made them both the same. I just kind of tacked them real quick. Not pretty welds, that's for sure, but they're going to get ground down anyway. So now I just need to cut off the edges of the grill to trim it so these will fit. Then I kind of tack these on both sides of the bumper and start building the top and bottom plates. It's only tacked, and it's already getting pretty rigid. Now we're going to work on something for the bottom here. Audio.
Fuck, bruh.
I think that turned out pretty good. Lots of structure, feels very solid. So I think what the next thing on the agenda is, I don't like this gap. I want to fill this somehow, and hopefully it doesn't look too bad. We'll just have to see. I mean, the right way to do it would probably make 2 triangles. Triangle here, and then a triangle to come up and connect there. I just don't have a lot of time. I think we're just going to put 1 chunk of steel right here, and then once we pull the bumper off and pull the winch out, I'll put a plate right here. And then I'll do the same thing on this side. I'll put 1 piece of plate right here, then box it in right there. That'll make this extremely sturdy right here, and then it'll help this look a little better. I don't like how this just drops off. So we want to try and hide this lip. This lip is meant to be hidden from the factory bumper, so we're going to do that. Let's bend up some tube. I think we're as far as we're going to get without bending tube. So once we bend this stinger, get it tacked on there, we can pull the whole bumper off and start finish welding all this. This is going to be hours of finish welding, as you can see. There's a lot of different bending videos out there, so I'm not going to show you all the ins and outs on my bender on this video, but I will introduce you to Bender Bending Unit Rodriguez. This is the first time I've used this bender on the channel. There's a lot of different strategies to doing a stinger. I like to just eyeball it, to be honest with you. I think it's faster. I could take and do a whole bunch of different measurements and try to make some kind of a grid and draw something out on the floor, but I'm not going to do any of that stuff. I've got a chunk of 1 3/4 tube. That's the size tube that I want to use. What I do is I take a tape measure, and this I want to use 2 bends because of the shape of the grill. I think it's going to look better if I have a bend somewhere around here and somewhere around there. I want to keep it low. So I take a tape measure, and I just kind of eyeball about where I'm going to want to put the bends. So I'm looking at, let's see here, maybe a little higher than that. Let's go like, the apex of the bend would be at 36 and 12. So then we just add another 12 to 36, puts us at 48. So I'm going to plan on cutting a 48-inch piece, and then I'm going to make a bend at 12 inches from one side and a bend from 12 inches at the other side. I have a bunch of these little pre-bent sections that I made in order to make this kind of process a lot faster and easier. So I can look at it and see exactly what I like. What I want is I want a hoop that's going to be low, and I want it to be kind of wide, and it looks like a 45 degree is probably going to be perfect. I've got a 22. I've got a bunch of different measurements and bends, and what I've done is I've written on there 48 degrees will make a 45, and then I've written a line on here that correlates to a certain part on the machine to make it easier to bend. I'm pretty happy with it. I think the bumper's turning out pretty good. I like the overall shape. I don't think it sticks out too far away from the truck, which is a big pet peeve of mine. So it's as slim and as high as I can get it and still be practical and still maintain having a winch. I'm a big fan of the plate steel look. I'm a big fan of stinger look, and I'm a big fan of the shackle receiver look. So I kind of incorporated all that. And I also really like the dimple dies. I think if you put too many dimples in something like this, it starts to look a little ridiculous. And so I put them kind of on bottom so they're not the center of attention, but it's kind of an accent. Pretty pleased with the way it turned out. The next step is going to be to remove this and start finish welding. I'm actually going to take the bar back off so I can finish weld some of these spots that are hard to reach, and then I'll be able to grind them down and make everything look really clean and smooth. So once I'm done finish welding all the plate steel and adding gussets and whatnot inside of it, then I'll put this bar back on, weld it all the way around, and then reassemble and put it back on the truck. I welded some stuff up in order to make it more solid while I was moving it around, and now I'm ready to start adding some gussets. I'm going to use this across the bottom here. I'm going to trace it out because I want to weld something to the base of this in order to make the front of it a little bit stronger. If I get up on a rock or something, this will bend pretty easy, but hopefully this edge will stay a little bit more rigid with something welded to it. I'm also going to weld this guy here for the same reason. To make sure this corner stays strong. You can see, if you look close, got a little bit distorted either from welding or from doing the dimple die, probably a little bit of both. So I'm going to straighten this out with a mini sledge. Then I'm going to weld this bad boy on there. Should be good to go.
Bruh.
I have been grinding like crazy out here. This floor is ridiculous. The whole shop looks like this. I love working on this truck. And this bumper really helped bring it all together. And it's starting to look a lot more complete, as you can see. I gave it a really rough grind, and I'm going to clean it up a little bit later, but I simply ran out of time on this. So I decided to mount it to the truck, get it the winch on there, and just get everything to where it's out of the way, so as I work in other projects, it's not in the middle of the floor. As you can see, I added this little rim along the bottom all throughout the bumper, because before it was just a plate and this would have been real easy to bend. But now, since it has this angle, it's going to be a lot harder to bash in. You know, on a rock or something like that, I'm sure you could still bash this in, but it's going to give up a lot more of a fight against a stump or something like that. As you saw, I wanted to add a little extra strength in the winch channel, so I added this guy right here. Goes all the way up to the front, welded it all the way to the bottom of the winch channel, so it's going to be a lot stronger for that, I'm sure. And I think overall this bumper is going to meet my needs just fine. Probably stronger than the frame and truck that it's connected to, in all honesty. You're definitely going to see this winch being used in a future video. I got a 12,000 pound winch because if I go off-road and I fill the bed full of wood, or I get a elk, you know, big old 1,000-pound elk, this truck's going to get heavy pretty fast. And if I get stuck way out in the middle of nowhere, I want to make sure that I have a winch that's strong enough to get us out. Thank you everybody on Instagram who gave me suggestions on which way to go with this bumper. I really appreciate your input. I kind of incorporated all of it, really. You know, some guys wanted dimple dies, some guys wanted tube. I try to do all of it. I think it turned out awesome. Thank you. If you learn anything from videos like this, make sure you support us on Patreon. And if you already support us on Patreon, thank you very much. You helped buy the raw materials that it took to build this bumper, and we really appreciate it. If you want to follow me on social media, I'm at BleepinJeep Nate. Matt is at BleepinJeep, and we'll see you guys next time.